Hi, good Shabbos, everybody. It's Ruben Levine. I missed doing this for the last 2 weeks. Purim just passed. Happy Purim belated. And the week prior to that, I think, was also a short week for some reason. Just happy to be back with all of you. This week's Parsha is Ki Tisa. It also happens to be Parshas Para. It's a special edition that we add to the end of this week's reading. Particularly the week after Purim and several weeks before Passover, we read this. And in this week's regular Parsha that we read every year, no matter what, Ki Tisa, there's some very interesting concepts that are shared here. It opens up with what we call Machatzita Shekel, where there was a census taken and everybody had to come up with a half a coin or a half a shekel or the half a value of a shekel. And every single Jew would be required to come and give that to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple Mount. And when every Jew came with a half a shekel, apparently that was the budget that ultimately was utilized to operate the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, that God would come down and visit with us, and v'shachanti betocham, as they say, would live in our midst in that great palace. So this was the operating budget that was raised. Then we also hear in this week's Parsha beautifully the concept of Shabbat, the Sabbath, Beni uvein bnei Yisrael ot hi leolam, we say in this week's Parsha, that the Sabbath is the special gift, this day that exists where HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael come together without any other external distractions for a period of time and really have a festive time. And we get what's called a Neshama Yetera, an additional soul, or our soul is somehow expanded on Shabbat. And then, interestingly enough, towards the end of this week's Parsha, we are told of a not so actually a flaw in our history, and that is Chet HaEgel, the worshiping of the golden calf just following while Moshe Rabbeinu was up in at the top of Sinai receiving the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it was just this incredible earth-shaking event that was going on that we were witnessing, and somehow we slipped and fell, and b'mehirut, and then speedily we immediately resorted to avodah zara, idol worship, which is something that we were exposed to in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, that we were supposedly taken away from so that we could be free of that. And we succumbed somehow to this. The entire klal, the Erev Rav, a very, very large segment of the Jewish people at the base of Mount Sinai, really, really slipped and deviated from what HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have been expecting from them. And then we have Parshat Para that we add at the end, which is the story or the telling of this red heifer that would be sought after all year long, to find that one cow that was purely red in hair and had no blemishes. And this was this animal was slaughtered and on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day, in the Beit HaMikdash that we helped fund with the Machatzita Shekel that we started the Parsha with. And the ashes of this sacrifice would be held onto in order to do tahara, to make people holy and pure again after they somehow became tameh. Somehow they were exposed to something that was impure, and they needed to go through a morphosis. And the concept that we see here is that there's always this duality. Everything comes in pairs. There's a cause and effect. We need to do a korban. We need to do an action in order to undo an action, a sin. And we need Shabbat. We need this day so that we can interact with God, and there's a relationship that can be maintained with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And ultimately, the Machatzita Shekel, this counting that we do at the beginning of the Parsha, also has a very important principle that sheds light on all of these other things that we learn about this week. Why do we have to give a half a shekel? And that's what I want to share with you from the Netivot Shalom, the Shlomo Rebbe. And then I show you the text here. Ze yitnu kol ha'over al ha'pikudim machatzita shekel b'shekel HaKodesh. So everybody was required to come and give this half shekel. Ha'ashir lo yabeh v'hadal lo yamit. The rich could not give more and the poor could not give less. Everyone had to give the same thing. V'lakachta et kesef ha'kipurim, and take this money that was given over to be mechaper. Everyone, by giving over this money, you were somehow getting a kapara. You were somehow being forgiven the moment you handed money and helped fund this entire operation. Me'et b'nei Yisrael v'natata oto el avodat ohel moed. And this funds should be used to go ahead and run the commercial cooking kitchen that we ran, this back of the house, this butcher shop. It was designed to fund this place and all of the beautiful ornaments and clay mikdash and all the mechanical systems that were inside that helped develop this relationship with this conduit and this hub that allowed us to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu down and create this cycle of being able to be metaher Klal Yisrael, to actually make the whole nation pure. He goes on to say, "Deheina HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara et kol habriya ba'ofen she'akol mitnaheg al yedei b'chei zivugim v'hitkashrut." He said God created this entire world so that there was always a need for things to operate in pairs or with some sort of connection and some sort of chain reaction between two events. Goes on to say, somehow there's always this connection between these two things. And he tells us that you cannot operate this world without two things coming together. And a shekel is not a shekel without two half shekels. And even Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of Klal Yisrael, the holiest person, who spent his life creating connections and teaching and being a teacher to students and being an advocate for Bnei Yisrael when he had to go to God to defend them after they did the Chet HaEgel, it was not possible without Moshe representing us. We needed that duality. We needed that plurality. And the Machatzit Shekel says everybody's equal in this process. Whether you're rich or you're poor, it doesn't matter. Each of you have an obligation to seek out another half to make a whole. You need to go ahead and help other people. You have a wife, you and your wife come together, you and your children come together, a teacher and a student come together, and that is how process and spirituality and growth and community remain connected. And when that happens, it also brings God down to be with us as well. So the duality of that relationship can coexist as well. And that's the underlying message of this week's Parsha. And it all starts with this very, very beautiful idea of Machatzit Shekel that sheds light on these interrelationships that are required to keep us whole. And as we go into this Shabbat, Parshat Parah, in a couple of weeks, we'll have Passover where we relive the exodus from Egypt and our opportunity to enjoy freedom. And today in COVID, when we've all been so isolated, it's so important for us to find ways to come together. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom and speak to you next week, I hope.